All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Thursday, August 29th. This recording is around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we are looking at the latest on Hurricane Dorian as it does move away from Puerto Rico and make its final approach to Florida. This evening's video is going to be a little more weather based and a little more just general things we're tracking here this evening, some of the real time update stuff. I've been posting about some on Facebook, but I wanted to go ahead and put another video out too this evening. So, what is the latest on Dorian right now? Well, we're watching an intensifying system right now. If you've been following the videos, we've talked about the fact that Dorian was expected to intensify pretty soon here. Since it's left Puerto Rico, Dorian's kind of been in this holding pattern to achieve Category 1 hurricane status very close to the island, and it's kind of held on since. What really happened is it was probably a tropical storm about here. So for this part, it was a tropical storm, and then it re-intensified into a hurricane. But the National Hurricane Center doesn't like to make any wild adjustments from advisory to advisory. So they probably saw it and said, hey, look, it still could be a hurricane, and they kind of left it alone. And now it is re-intensified to that point that they're saying it's at with those 80, 85 mile an hour sustained winds. And as we watch the storm right now, this thing is showing us some definite signs that it is intensifying. So this is the current water vapor imagery, and you can see that Dorian's outflow is much better today. We're looking for these high clouds at the edge of the thunderstorm, these little frilly kind of, they're called cirrus clouds. They're called cirrus blow off, or just they're essentially venting high clouds at the top of top of a hurricane. It has to be able to get the air that rises away from the top of it, so more air can rise. And what happens is the air rises up to the atmosphere, and at the top it has to go somewhere to get away from the storm. And when the storm can't do that, when it's constricted, it can't breathe very well. Then these storms typically have a hard time really intensifying. And that's kind of what we've seen with Dorian. All it had all the available fuel, it just couldn't really breathe well. This is a great gift from stormhamster.com. Guy runs it named Cranky Weather Guy. He writes great blogs. If you're really into meteorology, it's worth checking out. But this GIF shows really well what exactly happened. So what's going on is Dorian has an upper level low to its west. This is a real high up in the air area of low pressure, and what it's doing is it's beginning to retrograde away from the storm. So watch the beginning of the GIF right about here where it's pretty flat. And then watch these clouds, these frilly clouds, sort of begin to expand through the GIF. And right now, how they're pretty much stretched out all the way across the system. That tells us that as this low has begun to move backwards and away from Dorian, that has allowed the system to kind of grow and kind of breathe more instead of being real constricted up in the atmosphere. You can also see that outflow on this side of the storm has begun to improve. And right now, the third thing we're looking for is the dry airflow. If you see down here in this part of the Caribbean, this is a water vapor satellite image, and all the areas in white you see are a little more moist air, such as this region in this region, but the darker blues are indicating drier air. And Dorian had a feed of dry air today coming up through it. You can see this kind of break in the storm as the GIF restarts. You can see there's like kind of a little section that's carved out of the storm. But what's happening now is this severe weather tail has kind of moved over, and Dorian's also wrapping around this more moist air over the course of time, and it's sort of cutting off this deep dry flow. So what's going to happen is these thunderstorms will kind of cut Dorian's dry air feed off, and then Dorian will be in an overall more moist environment, and the system's going to have no issues intensifying. Looking at the national or the current recon data, we do have a Hurricane Hunter aircraft flying this system right now, and they made a pretty solid pass here a little while ago through the eye of the storm. They pretty much hit it dead on, flying right through the middle of Dorian. You can kind of see their flight path was this direction. Now they've turned off to the north. But looking at their data that they showed here. This is from tropicaltidbits.com's Levi Cowan's site, another great website if you're into hurricanes. And what we're looking at here is the recon data. What you want to pay close attention to right here is both the wind speeds on these blue dots, which indicate that the maximum surface winds are roughly around 80 knots, which is about 90 miles an hour, which is a little bit higher than what we have in the current advisory. But the bigger issue is the central pressure. They found a minimum central pressure when they flew through this part of the eye of about 973 millibars. When we're looking at these storms, the lower the pressure, the higher the wind speeds. As the pressure falls in the center of the storm becomes more and more intense. As the pressure, there's more of a difference in pressure from the middle of the storm to the outside of the storm. So 973 millibars is fairly impressive, and it makes for a much stronger Dorian than what we saw earlier in the day. If we look at the current public advisory, the central pressure of the storm is supposed to be 986 millibars. So that is more than 13 millibars or so below what we thought it was, which means Dorian is significantly stronger this evening, at least in that core of the strongest thunderstorms, than it was thought to be at 5 p.m. So A lot of times these things begin to drop their pressure, the wind speeds will respond. So going into probably the 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. advisories, we'll likely see that Dorian is a much stronger hurricane and potentially could be a major hurricane as early as tomorrow morning. So this was not unexpected. The Hurricane Center's forecast discussions had this thing becoming a major hurricane. Our satellite's a little slow to load. This guy's website's really popular and it kind of is having a hard time keeping up. But you can see these colder cloud tops kind of bursting in and out here. But I'll get past this. What we want to talk about too is the track a little bit. So the track National Hurricane Center really hasn't changed a whole lot. We still have this slowdown upon landfall and somewhere in the central or south central Florida East Coast as a major hurricane, potentially Category 3, Category 4 area. So what we're looking at is the potential for this thing to come on shore. This is the GFS's 18Z run. I'm not a big model chaser guy. I don't fall in love with computer models too much, but I believe we're starting to get near that time where we can start putting some stock in these. And I think the GFS doesn't have a bad idea here. So what the GFS believes is a rapidly strengthening Dorian. Now again, this could be not strong enough. I mean, the system keeps a pretty strong Dorian. 973 millibars is about what it's at right now. That central pressure. So the storm could be even lower than this as it's approaching. But the GFS will bring in a fairly strong storm right here, right along the southeast Florida coastline, going into really 0Z Tuesday, 06Z Tuesday, which is right about midnight on Tuesday, Monday night into Tuesday morning. And then a very slow crawl as it goes only from the coast about midnight on Monday into Tuesday morning. And this is Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. You see it's only made about a county's worth of motion, very small amount of change as Dorian begins to wind down and just batter Central Florida with some really nasty Category 4 winds that would be coming down to like Category 1 or so, but that would be a very slow wind down. This would be a hurricane for most of Central Florida and tropical storm conditions for virtually all of the state, or at least in bands. And then going into Wednesday, the system would begin to work its way up the coast as high pressure kind of builds back into the west here and would force Dorian a bit more north. We talked about earlier how the track basically is high pressure to the north will force Dorian down to the south and west eventually, and the question really becomes how south and west, or I'm sorry, how south and well, how south or north on the state it is, and then when does it make that turn back to the north? Is it over the state like the GFS thinks in this model run? Is it maybe possibly towards the Gulf, or is it even sooner, a la Matthew or a la something like Hurricane Floyd, where it gets real close and then maybe actually stays offshore? But the GFS kind of has a nice middle ground here, but this shows the potential for Dorian, where you're talking about tropical storm to hurricane force conditions starting as early as Monday afternoon along southeast Florida coast. Then you have another day or two of absolute hurricane conditions for parts of the state, and then you're talking about another day or two before the storm could be moving out by Friday morning away from the state. So we're talking about maybe a possibly 4 or so day window of just absolutely nasty conditions across the Sunshine State, and this would put a tropical storm across most of, if not all, the state, besides the extreme western panhandle, maybe say Tallahassee and westward, and hurricane conditions, winds over 75 miles an hour sustained for a large portion of the state, especially our central counties like Orlando also would be getting in on this. And then, of course, whoever it makes landfall over, whether it's West Palm, Port St. Lucie, Cape Canaveral, or areas further north or south, which are all still on the table tonight. So we're looking at potential for a serious storm. And then let's not forget, if this thing does not get far enough inland, we could potentially have a coastal runner where more heavy rain and possible tropical storm force conditions could be in tap for parts of southeast Georgia through the Carolinas going into the end of the week and into the weekend. So there's a lot to unpack with Dorian, and unfortunately, it's going to be kind of slow to all come together. So anyone along the coast this evening needs to be prepared and ready to act at a moment's notice. You may not get 4 or 5 extra days, from now to think about this. It may be, hey, we're calling your number, let's go. So if you're near the coast and you're thinking about it tonight, guys, be ready to go if you need to be called here, because this is going to be a powerful storm. It's going to be at least a Category 3, very, very likely. Category 4 is absolutely what's in the forecast, and what I would believe it would be as it approaches, could weaken as it approaches the eye wall replacement cycles, land interaction, slowing down. There's obviously 100 things that could happen, but you can't bank on that. You have to bank on the fact that you're ready to go when you're called and let nature take care of everything else, because that's all you can do. So that's pretty much the latest this evening, guys. The only thing I wanted to bring up before I cut this off is the historical significance of this. This is the Hurricane Center or the NOAA's hurricane database. I set a marker on Florida and put it out 200 nautical miles to encompass the entire state, or at least the east coast of Florida from the Keys all the way up to north of Jacksonville. This is every hurricane that has passed this marker as a Category 4 or stronger. The last storm to hit the east coast of Florida as a Category 4 or stronger was Hurricane Andrew in 1992. We had the 1926 Great Miami Hurricane. We had two hurricanes in the 40s that hit south of West Palm Beach. I'm sorry, 1928, that was the Okeechobee Hurricane. Then we had one in 1946 come on shore near Boca Raton. But Andrew was the last storm that hit South Florida or hit the area as a Category 4 or stronger storm. This is Andrew's, or one of these are Andrew's tracks right here. It's having a hard time showing me, but definitely rare company. Category 4s don't make it to this part of the state very often. The state's no stranger to them, but they're mostly central South Florida, and they're mostly, it's been a long time since we saw something like this. We've had a lot of close calls. There's Andrew's track right there. So we've had a lot of close calls, but we're talking a Category 4. This is very rare territory. So if you have a friend that lives somewhere on the East Coast and they go, oh, we're Floridians, they share some memes and we're all fine and we've lived through 100 hurricanes, this isn't anything that anyone's seen in a long time unless you lived in Miami 27 years ago. So please take this seriously. Please heed your local officials. Please be ready to evacuate if you need to, or be hunkered down if you think you're okay to stay. And we'll have much more on this through the night and through tomorrow. We'll be posting more videos and cracking this as close as we can, but it's going to be slow. It's going to be painful to get every detail ironed out, and it's going to take a little while, but we'll get through it just like we do the rest of them. So, anyway, guys, that's what I got for you this evening. Again, thanks for watching as always, and have a good one.